So how well do you think the average person can defend themselves? Because so many people think like, I'll beat that guy up, or I would do this or that. So what's your take on the average person's ability to defend themselves?
Are you talking about a person that's never trained before, or are you
Yeah,
talking about
exactly.
people that
No
haven't
training,
trained before?
no training, no cardio, 9 to 5, regular person.
So I guess the biggest thing is that I saw some of the comments in that, and obviously context is everything. You know what I mean? Like right now, even that question alone is really broad. You know what I mean? Like it's, you know what I mean? Like, you get some people that are just athletically gifted and strong and whatever. You know what I mean? We see that in jiu-jitsu all the time. We see guys come in that have never trained before, but there's just, there's an athletic spark, and then there's someone who's not, and it takes them a longer while to develop. And so the same thing goes with, with self-defense. And in a situation like that, everything is different. You know what I mean? It's context is obviously everything. So that's a really broad question. And that's the thing I kind of saw in the comments was, you know what I mean? Like people, they're like, what about this? What about, and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, and like, the way I look at it is that, when it comes to self-defense, no situation is alike, and no person is alike. You know what I mean? And so yes, there are people that are just naturally gifted in the sense where they'll be able to handle it. You know what I mean? Like, and there's other people. There's also another thing. There's some people are just naturally calm under pressure, and some people just panic and freak out. You know what I mean? So it's difficult. That's a difficult question. But yes, there are some people that that just need, just mentally or physically they're able to, and there's some people that will just freeze up in no ways.
I feel like it's, as an instructor, like, or even just a black belt in jiu-jitsu, it's hard to show techniques like that. And I purposely don't show too many self-defense techniques, just because there's so many like what ifs. Like, what if they do this? What if they do that? Well, I do kung fu, and I can fly. Like, so there's always like something crazy. Even if like you just showed like some basic, just basic distance management details that I thought was very important to share. But it kind of puts a lot of instructors off. Like, so a lot of instructors won't show any self-defense, even if they might be really well versed in it.
No, sure enough, and kind of like when you asked me to kind of speak about this, I thought about that as well. I mean, think about it. How long did it take us muscle memory wise when you first start just to do an armbar? You know what I mean? That was repetition after repetition after repetition, and then you go into a self-defense seminar and you see people that have never stepped on the mats in their lives before, and someone's showing them a technique, and deep down you go like, wow, like the chances of this person actually remembering anything that we're showing them right now under a high, a life at risk, you're in a life at risk situation, and you're expecting them to remember these details and everything, you know what I mean? So absolutely. So I get where instructors are so reluctant to show this, these type of things. It also it made me think, a lot of what you showed, the video that you and I did in space management and that, you know what I mean, and because of time constraints, you had to edit out certain things, which obviously, when people watch the video, they say, well, what about this and what about that? Even some of the stuff that we kind of covered, but we didn't have time to like go in depth and whatever, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of like how it got me thinking on this entire topic. It even spurned the I'm going to ask you a question. When the word self-defense gets said to you, what's the first thing you think about?
I think of street fights. I'm thinking street fights, guys defending themselves. And I mean, that's not always the people that need protection. It's not usually someone strong. It's going to be someone weaker,
So exactly, you just proved my point and what I'm going to outline right now. The word self-defense, everybody immediately thinks combat, physical, fight, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's been a gap in what we're actually trying to incorporate. You know what I mean? Because like you said, the thing I say is by the time it's got to the physical, for most people, it's too late.
Yeah.
And so the word self-defense, it's almost, I want to back it up a bit and say it should be self-survival. You know what I mean? And I use the animal kingdom analysis a lot in situations. By the time the lion is running after the buck, the gazelle, or the impala, or by the time he's close and whatever, and by the time he grabs it, you know what I mean? Self-defense for that buck is almost done. You know what I mean? Self-defense started a long time before that lion even got on the chase. And that's the mental that I'm talking about. You know what I mean? When, in life, there's the predator and there's the prey. And the prey self-defense happens way before it even comes under attack from that predator, from that lion. And it's a mental, it's a checklist of listening to, I'm using, like, let's just say this example with the bucks. Every time it walks out onto the plains, into the grasslands, it's listening for animals, other animals, birds give off a warning sign to it. You know what I mean? It smells, you know what I mean? It's incorporated everything that's happening in its entire environment, and anything that offsets that frequency starts to raise its self-defense. Now, we as humans possess the exact same thing. We're of the animal kingdom, but I think that's what happens is we've become so far advanced in being modern humans that we've neglected the instinct ability that we have for self-defense. You know what I mean? We've been numbed from distraction, from our phones and things like this. So the word self-defense in itself starts way before any physical altercation or interaction occurs. And that's kind of the things that I wanted to touch on when you and I did that demonstration. Was there's a lot more to self-defense than learning how to get out of a physical situation, because in a lot of times, once it's got to that physical situation, for most people, it's too late. Even experts. I mean, we see it happen. We see it happen with our advanced soldiers. Guys in special forces. But if they're ambushed in a certain way, those guys are the top of the apex when it comes to being able to handle situations. But if they misjudge a situation and get ambushed, man, it's too late. So the word self-defense, I think, like I said, it's a little misleading. People, as soon as they hear that word, immediately jump to, physical interaction. What am I going to do? And then it kind of also leads into, like how we know, as an instructor, sometimes, coming back to Jiu-Jitsu analysis, guys, when you teach them, first, you got to break through the ego barrier. Yeah, I hear what my instructor's saying, but I would do this and I would do that. You know what I mean? And then, but when you teach, a lot of times when you teach girls initially, they don't have those roadblocks in their learning process in place first, that you got to break down first. A lot of times, with girls and females, you tell them, hey, this is how we do this, this, and this, and they immediately grasp it, and they take to the technique pretty quickly.
That kind of leads to my next question. It's like women's self-defense. And it's kind of like, what do you think instructors should focus on with them? And as an example, like a simple example is like when you're teaching a female student, like say boxing or something, you teach them to punch up, right? Because they're gonna some bigger person they're going against, possibly. It makes no sense to punch down or eye level, right? It's like, okay, you're gonna be punching up. I'm not saying they should be punching, but just like that's kind of like the mindset I was looking at. So again, it's like, what do you think instructors could focus on to better, help women with their self-defense? Or
I think number one, and it goes, and it goes with people with women who are not training and women that are training. I think number one, what an instructor should focus on when it comes to self-defense, especially with someone who's physically a little bit, I don't want to say the word weaker, but, not as physically, dominating or whatever. I know that sounds wrong, but anyway, so, a good friend of ours, Paul, he runs a corporate awareness self-defense company that does seminars and everything. And I've participated in them, and I learned a lot from him. And the example that Paul always uses is he uses the pufferfish example. A pufferfish is, when it's not all puffed up, it's a small little fish, it looks pretty harmless or whatever. But that thing puffs up and it's got those spikes and everything. Nobody messes with it. And I think that's the key first thing is instilling confidence into people of smaller stature or women or whatever, to walk with a pufferfish type of attitude. You know what I mean? Because, coming back to, if we're going to, context is everything, but if we're talking about on the street, if you're talking about someone being vulnerable or being attacked or whatever, again, it goes back to the predator and the prey. What predators do is they watch, they look, and they look for the, they look for the weak, they look for the young, they look for the injured, and they look for typically the elderly or the weak. They're looking for the softest target possible. So if you carry a mindset in yourself that you're not a soft target, you know what I mean? You're that pufferfish. You walk around, you're looking around, you're aware of your situations, you're not distracted and everything. That's the first thing that I would go. And then from there, I would use that, that analysis to then break down into, certain techniques and all that kind of thing. But number one is always the mentality behind it.
Something I've been thinking a lot about is that I need to look at the statistics, but I believe that most attack situations occur, specifically for females, it occurs between people that they know or that they know of. So it's not usually like, a complete stranger. It's usually maybe a friend of a friend or a friend of their family. So I think that might put them off guard a lot. Maybe they trust the person or.
So, yeah, I mean, exactly. And again, it goes back to, you know what I mean? Like now we're breaking down situations and everything like that. And I think one of the biggest effects of what gets people into bad situations is also we're a polite society. Many times when you speak to somebody after they've been attacked and you break down the situation, Alec, we all have an instinct where our instinct is just as powerful as any other mammal, any other creature on the earth. You know what I mean? We didn't get to the top of the food chain by being physically dominant. We got to the top of the food chain from our intelligence and from having, a direct touch on our instincts. And so in those situations, a lot of times, most often than not, victims in those situations, you'll ask them, hey, did something feel wrong? And 9 out of 10 times, they will say yes. And then it sounds like a brutal question, but you say, why didn't you remove yourself from that situation? I didn't want to be rude. It's someone I knew. I thought it would offend them and all this kind of thing. You see this type of thing happening a lot. You know what I mean? A lot of times your instinct, it doesn't lie to you. You know what I mean? But at the same time, sometimes when you rely on your instinct, it can also be conceived as being rude, because if that wasn't the person's, if it wasn't the person's intentions, and you've gone and said, I'm leaving or I'm getting out of here or whatever, and it's perceived as rude. So a lot of times we turn down, what doesn't feel right in order to be polite. You know what I mean? You see this. I was doing a conference with Paul, and one of the ladies, she, unfortunately, coming back to a situation where it was random, she was walking down the street. 2 guys were approaching her. She was the only person on the street. She felt like, man, this doesn't feel right. This, this is not feeling good. But she didn't want to come across as rude in case she was wrong. So she continued on her path. She shut down her instinct and she continued on her path into basically into a dangerous situation. And unfortunately, it wasn't good. She was assaulted. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
So, like I said, it's a very difficult subject. It's a difficult topic. You know what I mean? And again, it goes back to, you know what I mean? There's so many what ifs, but you know what I mean? I think a key portion of it is to really try and get in tune with what your instincts are telling you.
Yeah, man, it's sad, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was, it was a heavy moment in that seminar. You know what I mean? Like I'm so thankful that she was, brave enough to share it with us. But again, this is you'll if the more you go down this path, the more you go down this topic, the more you'll find situations like this. You know what I mean? Like you said, we are a polite society. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, because of that, some people would rather put themselves in harm's way than potentially be impolite in case they were wrong. You know what I mean? Whereas our survival instinct should take precedence. It should be number one. You know what I mean?
Ulli, this a little bit personal for you. Have you ever had to use your jiu-jitsu to defend yourself?
So again, like how we kind of went over in the little the demonstration video that we did, but I've had to use, I've used it many times with the line of work that I'm in. You know what I mean? I know most of your viewers maybe by now realize, I work in the nightclub industry and whatever. So I've used it more in the sense of obviously not getting myself hurt, but also it's helped me a huge amount in not putting any hurt on someone who's, that I'm having to deal with. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, I tell this to guys all the time, the guys that work in the same industry that don't have any training or whatever. Sometimes they have to use more force than necessary because they're not sure where the stopping line is. So sometimes guys go over that line and then try to bring it back down again. Whereas, all of us that have been training for a long time, we know exactly how much and we don't have to exceed the force that we need necessary. So it's been a great tool. It's been a great tool for the line of work that I've been in for many years. As far as ever being under attack or anything, no, I haven't been under attack.
I'm just picturing you like sneaking up on people, like I got him.
Well, it's kind of funny that you say that. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's like just using scenarios in my place of work. You know what I mean? Like, again, space management, body language, that type of thing. More often than not, if I always, if I have an employee that's already dealing with a situation and the person that him and the person are kind of face to face talking, I'll go to the back of the person. I'll stand nearby. I want to even announce it. I'll stay silent. You know what I mean? Like, I'll stay silent. You know what I mean? And because his attention is obviously distracted, and that way, you know what I mean? And that, again, using that example as well, you know what I mean? It goes back to put yourself in a favorable position in order to lessen the severity of a potential situation and cause way less harm to yourself. I have a saying, like I said, bringing up ego again, man. Ego will get you hurt. Ego will get you killed. And not even, and if, because this is, a jiu-jitsu related podcast and channel that you have, so much of that implies to training and jiu-jitsu too. You know what I mean? We see it time and time again. The guys, you know what I mean, where ego prevents them from learning. Ego prevents them from progressing. You know what I mean? Ego hurts the results in competition a lot of times. You know what I mean? That's what makes the sport that we do so great. Is it's such a humbling, it's such a humbling experience. It's such a growth-induced experience, that we train in.
So I'm just gonna assume you would say jiu-jitsu is effective for self-defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like there is maybe I should actually share the story with you guys. I should, I should share this story. Yeah. I should share this story with you. Okay. This, uh, I said the story at the, when I received my black belt, and it was basically the reason why I even got into jiu-jitsu in the first place. I come from South Africa. We didn't have wrestling growing up. We didn't have jiu-jitsu. South Africa is a very macho society. Us guys, South African men, we're rugby players. We're tough. You know what I
Sounds like
mean?
Brazil too.
Yeah, but the Brazilians had, they had jiu-jitsu and everything like this. I'm talking like, when I was, growing up all the way until here, you know what I mean? Like I said, macho society, rugby players, you know what I mean? Like, some of the hardest, toughest guys, in sports and everything, you know what I mean? And so, and the same thing happened, when it comes to fighting in South Africa. You either, you basically boxing or kickboxing when it's fighting. You're standing up, you guys are, and so I moved to the US and I get into the bar business and I become a bouncer and everything like that. And a few years later, I pick up boxing again in this country and everything like that. And obviously I'm hearing all about, jiu-jitsu on the ground, blah, blah, blah. My mentality, I'm like, man, they're not going to get me down. I'm going to hit them. I'm going to hit them before they get me down and everything like that. And it's, people that, locally and a lot of national, and internationally known, there's Rafaela Sansao and Diego Saraiva. We're all at the same gym together. They're the jiu-jitsu instructors. They do MMA at the time. I'm just boxing all the time. I'm probably 220 pounds, I'm thinking, and those guys at the time were like fighting at like 155 pounds or whatever, and they're constantly inviting me upstairs, come roll with us, And I see that they're black belts, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, those guys are 155 pounds, you know what I mean? I was like, it kind of like, in my ignorance, I was like, it's probably like the same in karate, like they give, they give kids black belts in karate, you know what I mean? Like, so I was like, they're probably black belts for 155 pounds. They're not black belts for all weight ranges. You know what I mean? I was like, come on. And eventually those guys, they talked me into it. And I went upstairs and the two of them put it on me so good that I couldn't believe it. I've never felt so helpless in my life. And I was driving home from the gym that night and I was like, man, I'm a total fraud. I cannot go through life. Cannot go through life knowing that there are guys that weigh that much that could literally end my life if they wanted to, you know what I mean? And there's nothing I could do about it. I was like, when they, once, when either of them had me, pinned on the floor, I couldn't move. There's no movement I made could have got me out of that situation. It didn't matter how big I was. And I was like, I cannot look people in the eyes and pretend to be this big tough South African guy, knowing that the guys that size that could just handle me like this, you know what I mean? And so I had to learn the sport. And so long story short, I know this is I've diverted this whole thing, but long story short, absolutely. If you're training in jiu-jitsu, 100%, it is maximum. You have an advantage as far as physical self-defense goes. Absolutely, over the average person.
That kind of reminds me of, I asked you the question of how well could an average person defend themselves, and so like that's perfectly kind of touches on it, like that skill. They weren't bigger than you, but they had that skill over you, so that really made a difference.
Oh yes, exactly. Like I said, I mean, like I was, on paper, like, you know what I mean? Like you said, like, and it goes all the way back to the start of the UFC when the demonstration of and absolutely, you know what I mean? And just, so yes. So no, absolutely 100% jiu-jitsu, you have an advantage as far as self-defense is concerned.
That's pretty much all the questions I had. Did you have any questions for me? I don't have any self-defense stories.
Honestly, that was going to be my next question. I was like, have you ever got into any altercations on the street?
That was kind of like before my time. So like the guys training before me, like they used to get in fights, you know, yeah, guys like Crazy Horse, you just judo throw people at parties,
Yeah.
Brazilian Cabeção, man, these just crazy guys. Tony Barker, I'm shouting you out, Tony Barker, wherever you are. So just like the guys like above me, you know, a few belts ahead of me, like man, they were just so much more like aggressive and like, you know,
Yeah.
man, I think I learned a big lesson like from watching those guys. I was like, man, I need to, number one, don't drink, don't drink, and number two, stay out of trouble. So that helped me. That was my self-defense.
Dude, those 100%. Those guys you named, and the same thing, like those days, you know, those times, those like
they were looking for
it was
fights, Ulli. They were looking for like, oh man, that guy, he looked at me weird, man. Okay.
And you could get away with it back then. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
We didn't have those good cell phone cameras. We had the flip phone.
I shouldn't say it. You know what I mean? But exactly, like working in bars and nightclubs back in those days was a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Like, we got some fun stories from them as well. You know what I mean? But those
Ulli,
you're not allowed to do that.
Tell us about the high life of Atlanta before.
The what?
The Atlanta's highest, you know, when the club scene was at its highest point. Give me one story about that, Ulli.
Oh man, it's just so many. Yeah, like it used to be. it used to be the Wild West, man. And literally, I mean, your regular nightclubs would close down at 4 a.m. and then there used to be two. There used to be two clubs that kind of went 24 hours. So, I mean, weekends were crazy. People were just crazy. I mean, it was wild times, but
yeah, I felt like I wasn't even really a part of it. I'd like touched it towards the end, but it seemed wild. A little bit was a part of.
Yeah. Now, I mean, listen, there's a lot of like, I shouldn't even say it, but there's a lot of parties around town that are not licensed. Oh. But back in the day, these two clubs in particular, you know, I mean, they were fully licensed, you know, legal to be operating and everything. So it was just literally like, we go to the regular club until 4 a.m. and then you go to one till like 5, 6 a.m. and from now on you move into the other one. And so yeah, man.
Now it's like 2, 1:30.
Yeah, now exactly. Now you know now your regular clubs are pretty much shut down by 3, and most people are just out. You know, like if you're out after 3, you're probably in a place that's not supposed to be open. But
you guys are like still partying around 6. Jesus, dude, I'm glad I wasn't around for that.
Trust me, working in those places. Now I'm glad. You know, I'm so glad we closed it earlier than that. I'm glad I'm not up.
There's no way you could have trained 6.
No. It's hard enough as it is right now. You know what I mean? So yeah, no, that would have been impossible.
Dude, just go from the club straight to the mat, man. Easy.
Oof.
We had some of the guys would go out on Friday night and sleep at the gym, go straight to the gym, sleep a few hours, and teach kids class on Saturday.
I remember those days. When you guys used to do that kind of stuff.
I didn't do that. I was the assistant, so I was already there.
There were a couple of guys in your crew. I remember that.
Oh yeah. Did that. I didn't say I wasn't part of the crew. I just said I was, a little too young.
Yeah.
All right, Ulls, I think that's it, man.
All right, buddy.
Anything you want to shout out, or anybody you want to shout out?
No, just like you said. I mean, like I said, I know, you got a big audience, and like you said, like just like obviously context is everything. It's so hard. It's so hard for us to, we touch on these topics. We do somewhat of a brief demonstration in that, you know what I mean? But I totally get, just like when you're instructing on the mat, you're getting it now in the feedback from your viewers in that, what is this? What about this? What about that? You know what I mean? So, it's a huge topic, you know what I mean? Like you bringing up this topic, it's massive, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
it's really massive. Everybody's got their own takes on it and all that kind of thing. I do get why, a lot of instructors stay away from it and that, you know what I mean? But it's an important topic, and it's pretty cool that you're covering.
I mean, it's like 1 minute, guys. How much information can we go over in 1 minute? It's like we can't do everything. So, yeah, we got a lot of comments on that one. So,
yeah, like I said, I mean, if you see some more feedback that somebody's got, questions or whatever, and you maybe need an answer, or you want to try get an answer, we can try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess that's the last thing I can think of. You know what I mean? It's like so much of it is, kind of what I touched on in the beginning. The word self-defense. It really got me thinking, because so many people, as soon as they hear that word, they're already thinking about physical. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean?
I'm thinking UFC.
Or I'm just, as soon as you say, you say the word self-defense, somebody's thinking about either punching, kicking, shooting, whatever. You know what I mean? There's, you know what I mean? And I think the word should kind of backtracked a bit, and more of the mentality be behind it. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, it's almost like, one of the things I thought of was just like how we say, you hear it in the UFC all the time, the guys with the best fight IQ do so much, do so well, for so long in their careers. You know what I mean? So I think it's kind of like, you got that, those guys have a fight IQ. I think the same thing goes with self-defense. It should be a self-survival IQ. You know what I mean? And the way modern society has, it's kind of like, it's numbed us, and distracted us. Our phones are a huge distraction and everything like that. And I think that's what should be focused on more, self-survival and self-defense IQ. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The mentality of it.
I think just talking about these topics, because, like, again, I don't really hear too many instructors. How many world champions do you hear talking about self-defense or, stuff like this? So I think if we just bring it up more often, we can just, it's better. Like, it creates a dialogue, like we said, the comments, at least people are talking about it, hopefully in a positive context. But
no, I saw, like, most of the things you got, you know what I mean? Like, were very positive, even friends of mine that, once I shared your video, you know what I mean? They're like, wow, I didn't even think about that. I didn't quite, as simple as it is, I didn't think about it. You know what I mean? So, and they've been, I've heard from friends, they've been practicing it in their office, and they've been practicing in their social settings and all that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's just, it's, I think it's important. You know what I mean? I think it's, it's in today's times, it's these are things we need to visit. We need to keep current.
And it's not just jiu-jitsu people. Like, there's a lot of non-jiu-jitsu people. It might be, a regular person, a neighbor, a friend that might, Ulli showed something. Okay, maybe I need to get some classes. I think I need to learn how to defend myself. So you never know what's going to come of it.
No, exactly. Yeah, like most of the friends of mine that have reached out, and said, they've never trained at all, they just, they watched the video that you produced, and once I shared it, and then they've been just practicing those type of things. You know what I mean? It's kind of given them a little bit more of a confidence to, like you said, look into perhaps getting into training and all that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they think, jiu-jitsu. Okay, I'm thinking UFC, fighting. They're not thinking about, protect myself, protect my family.
No, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like you said, like, what you just touched on there as well. You asked me, have I ever, had to use it or whatever? But it's it's kind of like, it's an unbelievable art to help you prevent yourself from being hurt. You know what I mean? Like, let's go back to a jiu-jitsu situation with somebody who's bigger and stronger, and somebody who's smaller and lighter. But so even if the person who's bigger and stronger,
some lightning hitting is about to hit
the role, the person who's smaller still has the ability to control and lessen how much of that physical ability that bigger person's allowed to put on them. And that goes down to an attack as well. You know what I mean? Sometimes in a self-defense situation or whatever, you just got to basically hold the person. You're the smaller, lighter person. You've just got to basically be able to hold on long enough until help arrives. And that's what's so great about jiu-jitsu. So, yes, typically the bigger person or whatever, they might be, imposing their will, but you're able to lessen the amount of damage that you're taking until help gets on the way. And that's coming, that made me think about, like, in a work situation. Yeah, sure, there's been situations where, there's been a pile on or whatever. And I've been able to, and I'm the first person that's responded. I've been able to secure myself in a situation where I'm not winning the situation, but I'm not getting hurt either. And it's buying me enough time for help to come and, and control the situation. So I think that's something we should think about as well.